Okay, so we're getting ready to do our color illustrations. So this was my rough, right, in pencil on tracing paper. I've got that ready. And let's talk about some of the supplies that you need. So the first thing that you need is paper that you're going to color on. This is the marker paper. This is the Graphics 360 marker paper, and I prefer this one because it's slightly transparent to where if I place my tracing paper with my rough illustration underneath it, I can see enough through that I can then recreate my sketch. Okay, so being able to see through my marker paper is important. Now, one thing to know about marker paper is that there is a difference between the top side and the bottom side. The top side is intended for black ink, okay, and the bottom side is intended for your colors. It could be different per brand, obviously, but there is a reason. If you use the color on the wrong side of the paper, it gets very splotchy. So you will see that if that happens. So I like to use 2 pieces of paper or my tablet, doesn't matter, because when I do color, I will likely get some bleed through. Okay, so I had already torn this out and I had marked which was the top, so that way I can make sure to put my marker on the underside, the bottom side of the paper. Right, so now I can see through. Now I also prefer to use, I like Prismacolor color pencils just because it's what I've always used and the pigmentation's great. I like to use a French gray. These are about a 50%. You can use a lower percentage, but a French gray is kind of like a taupey, grayish, beige color. And it's great for trying to hide your outlines so that way you get a more, I guess, natural look rather than, say, an anime or comic book type look. It just depends on your preference of illustration, and this is mine. And then I have a variety of markers. I have 2 different skin tone colors. I have 3 different gray tones. And every color I do in multiples. That way I can have shadows and shading that are true to the color rather than adding grays to it and kind of muddying the color and things like that. So I've got some hair tones. I've got a color for the skirt. I've got a color for the shirt. I'm going to do the jacket white. And then I've got the skin tone. So I'm going to focus on the first illustration that I had roughed out for right now. So I'm going to start with my pencil. I make sure it's very, very sharp. And I'm going to draw very, very lightly. I'm not trying to create very harsh lines. And I just need a little bit better light. Okay. So just trying to get the final lines that I decided on. You know, on my rough, I could be messy and kind of figuring it out and undecided. But as I move to my final, I want to be a little more precise. If I go very light and if I'm coloring this, say, a dark color, it's not going to really make a difference because it's not going to be visible. But if I'm trying to make, say, a white or a light color, then it's going to be much more visible in the end. So I want to make sure to be intentional with my lines. Okay. And I'm making some changes and adjustments as I see fit to kind of get the overall look that I am hoping for. Okay, and I am trying to do this quickly, so I'm not super focused on the detail. Plus, it's very late. And as you can see, I'm really just doing this for my students, trying to help them to work on their illustration skills. I'm actually teaching draping this term, but in our draping class, our students have to build their portfolio, and part of building your portfolio obviously requires some illustration work. At our college, we did not offer a full-on fashion illustration class. We are a community college, and our program is unfortunately ending at the end of this school term. So most of the students have gotten some illustration instruction, but not a whole bunch, and some didn't really get any, just depending on what time they took our program. So in order to make sure that all of the students at least have a little bit of illustration experience, I am doing these videos to just kind of help summarize how to do it. So it's very basic, just trying to give my students some help in the right direction, okay? And let's see, I don't know if you can, I need to get a little closer because my vision, it is dark and late, and I can start kind of so I can just kind of add in some details as I see fit. Alright, so markers. And this is not to say that this is the only way or the best way, this is just the way that I do it. So I like to use two colors, a darker and a lighter, and I like to do my skin tone first. I like to wash in my lighter tone and give it a good coat. You have to work quickly with these markers because as they dry, they do not blend. But if you do it quickly, they will blend beautifully. Okay. So the great thing about the Prismacolored pencils is that they'll kind of blend a little bit, but not too much. They don't smear like a graphite would. If you used a regular pencil, it would smear when your marker hits it. But by using the Prismacolor, it just kind of blends nicely and goes right over it. So I used the darker color to just kind of lay in where some shadows would be, so where the legs cross over each other or where things are further behind each other, that kind of thing. And to blend it out and make it not look so harsh, I just go back to the light tone. So it's just a combination of using the lighter and the darker back and forth, okay? So I have a hand right here. I'm just going to kind of block in the color. If it's not perfect, I don't personally mind. I kind of like the artsy brush strokes, a little bit sketchy. That's my preference, which is why I don't go with, say, the harsh black outlines, because I feel like they're too precise. I use precision and I use pens and, you know, sharp lines for my flat sketches for sure, because those are technical flats. Those are important. Those are all about the detail. But on my fashion sketches, I like it to be a little more artistic and free-flowing. I like it to more be representative of the feel of the garment, the feel of the fabric, the person I am trying to design for. So I'm just washing in the color in the light tone, and then I come back in with the dark tone and just add a little bit of depth and dimension to the face. And I go back in, blend it out. Okay. And if I want a little more darker, I just go back with my markers and I just layer it until I'm happy with it. And it will always dry lighter than it shows. So if you feel like, oh my gosh, I just took it a little too dark, give it a minute. It's probably going to change on you really fast. So Don't stress too much, okay? And just practice makes perfect. So you just layer and layer until you feel comfortable with the color. And like I said, it's gonna change, so don't freak out if it isn't perfect yet, okay? Also, by the time you're done adding all the color and all the color pencil and all the detail work, it's gonna change so much between then and now, so don't worry if it's not perfect at the first phase. So I've got the color blocked in for the skin tone. I am going to do a pink top, a teal skirt, and a white jacket. I just feel like that gives me a little bit of range of kind of showing how to blend colors. So most of these markers have two edges. So they have a chisel tip and they have a brush tip. Those are my preference. I love the brush tip just because it's like a watercolor brush, right? It's easy to blend. But you can use the chisel tip. The only ones I really don't like are the super fine tip ones. Alright, so just like my skin, I'm laying in my lightest color. Okay. And then I'm going to take my darker tone and I'm just going to kind of come and wherever basically things would be in shadow, right? They'd be kind of buried behind. I can lay that in and darken it up and blend it out with my lighter tone. Okay, and maybe a little shadow under the bust line. Okay, and there's my top. Okay, since I have my pink here, I might give her a little tone to her lips using the same colors. Why not? Okay, with the light pink, if I want to, give her a little blush tone to the face. But I want to blend that out with my skin tone, my lighter skin tone. Told you I prefer the brush tip. My favorite skin tone is the E00, it's now called Cotton Pearl, and E21, which is called Soft Sun. So those are my two favorite, just for a standard Caucasian skin tone. Sometimes I like to warm it up with a darker tone, but my marker is dead, so I gotta get a refill for that. It's also another reason I like the Copics is because they're refillable. So I've done my skin tone, I've done my shirt. I'm gonna go ahead and move to my skirt just because my jacket's gonna be white, so I just want to be a little bit careful not to get my color on that area. So I always just start by opening up the tones I'm going to blend. So I've got a lighter and a darker teal. This one is BG49 and BG09, so duck blue and blue green. So same as before, I'm just going to come in here and start finding my outline to wash my color in. And the great thing about these, you know, like when you're a kid and you use Crayolas, right, and you color back and forth, you get all these streaks and these lines. But with these markers, you just color over it and then you fill it in, you just saturate the area and it colors smooth and flat. You don't end up with all those streaks and those lines. And that's why you can blend your two colors together as well. So it's definitely worth the investment. They're expensive, don't get me wrong, I get it. But when you have the money to invest in them, they are a tool that is necessary if this is something that you wish to do. So I'm going to go in with my darker tone now, start building up my kind of shadow areas under where the jacket falls on the body, where the legs kind of fold around towards the back. And then her legs are crossed over, so I'm going to get kind of some shadow or some dark area right here where the two legs cross over each other. And wherever I add that dark, I'm just going to go back and add my light to kind of scrub it out and brush it out. I'm just alternating back and forth between my dark and my light. I know this is fast, I'm really sorry, but I just need to be able to get my students the basic information that they need. Okay, and once again, it's going to dry a little bit lighter, so I'm going to let it be. It's pretty dark, you know. Alright, and maybe just for fun, we'll give her a dark teal shoe. What do you think? Alright, let's see, she has a belt. Maybe I will stick with a standard black for the belt. Okay, I'm just going to come in here. Alright, so I said I was going to keep the jacket white. The paper is white, right? So there's not a lot to do, but you do have to create shadow and depth and dimension. So I'm going to use grays. So I prefer a neutral gray, which is, it's not cool and it's not warm. It's right in between. They do have warmer grays and they do have cooler grays. So cooler grades is going to lean a little more towards blues, be more compatible with your blue tones. A warmer gray is going to be more compatible with your oranges and reds. But I prefer just a neutral because it's easy, and when you can't purchase every marker, why go super specific? Also, when I do my grays, I skip one in between because I don't need every color. I just need every other, or maybe every three. So I pulled out an N1, which is a neutral gray 1, an N3, which is a neutral gray 3, and an N5, which is a neutral gray 5. Okay. I'm not sure how dark I'm going to go, but I like to pull out that darker one just in case if I do need it. Okay. So as always, I just start with my lightest tone, and I'm going to come in and basically wherever there's folds in the fabric, it's going to have some shadow. So I want to start kind of placing that in there. Now remember, the marker will dry lighter, so it's going to seem a little dark at first, but by the time it's dry, it doesn't seem so bad. Okay. Also, when it's further back, say the back of the skirt where it kind of pokes out, I'm going to add a little bit more shadow in there too. Alright, so I've got some folds going right here. I have this collar, so where the collar lays over the top of the jacket portion, I'm going to have some shadow underneath there. Got some fullness in my sleeves. Just kind of where the underarm is, makes it a little darker there. At the back of the neck. And I'm just kind of laying in a little bit of depth and dimension. Okay. And once I go in with my lightest color, that was my N1, I'm going to go with my N3. Okay. And I'm just going to use the very fine tip and try to be a little more precise. And start creating kind of some line for the folds. This way I don't have to have just, you know, a pen line. I can use a shade to help create the texture and dimension. Okay. And if I outline a little bit now, it's less I have to do with colored pencil, and it gives it a softer look in the end. Like I said, this is not the only way to do it. This is just my preference of how I choose to do it. There's lots of other ways to illustrate, and people have design preferences. If you like more like the comic book style or an anime style, you can incorporate whatever your artistic preference is into your fashion illustrations. You know, that's what makes it your fashion illustration. Yes, you want to get the basics in there, but you have some creative preference. Okay, and that's probably as much as I'm going to do. I don't think I'm going to add the N5 after all. Okay, now some of those lines look a little bit harsher than I intended them, so I'm going to come back in with my, especially around the collar, I didn't intend for it to get that dark. Okay, I'm just going to kind of try to soften it up and blend it out a little bit with my gray hair. Okay. And then we're going to let it be. Alright. And then hair. So I have 3 colors here for hair. A light, a medium, and a dark, basically. So just going to prep my markers. By having them open and ready, it just means that I can switch them out really quickly and blend them faster. Okay. I'm just going to kind of get a feel for the eyebrow right here with the lightest tone. Okay. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of block in the color. This one's almost dead. Gotta order some new refills. Okay, enough to kind of get it blocked in. Alright, so once I have the lighter color blocked in, I go in with my medium tone and I can start flicking the ink. So it's all about, you know, allowing your brush stroke to start heavier and darker and kind of soften as it goes out. Okay. Trying to mimic the kind of the directionality and the flow of natural hair. Okay, and then I'm going to come in just into the darkest areas and add a little bit more. And I'm going to go back to my medium tone and blend that out. Okay. Alright. And by kind of layering the colors, you get a little more dimension. Okay, not my best job, but you know, it gives you the idea. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now, I will then go to my colored pencils, and this is just going to allow me to kind of make things pop a little bit. I will use black very sparingly. Okay, so for things like, say, the pupils and eyelashes. Okay. If I need to bring a little definition into the mouth, I can. And then when I do this for detail, I'm not trying to outline the whole thing. I'm trying to change the pressure in the stroke of my pen and be strategic as to how I place it. I'm just trying to bring emphasis to the darkest areas and or to the lines that need to be sharper, you know. I'm not trying to say outline every detail. Just the ones that need a little bit of pop. So you can see when I do use the black and I take a stroke, I allow it to kind of taper off. It's not a continuous line. Okay, and maybe just a pop right there. Okay. So I know I didn't focus on detail in the beginning. With my coloring, I was just blocking it in mostly. So now if I want to bring a little detail in, I can. This hand is awkward. Okay. Vice versa, if you don't want to do the outlining in black, you can also use like a sienna. So normally whatever I did for the arms, I would stay consistent, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So let's say I didn't want to do the black. I found that this is too harsh and too outlined. I can go into just a darker skin tone or a brown tone, and this will allow me to outline or emphasize without using black. But whatever you start with, you should stay consistent with. So don't do what I did and mix it up. Okay. And if I feel I want a little more shadow, I can use my colored pencil. And I can even blend it with my marker. To soften it up a little bit. Okay. So just play with it. Play with the idea. Okay. If you want a little more defined lines in the hair, you can go in with the colored pencil and add detail. But that is basically how you color in. Some basic coloring techniques for a fashion illustration. And I hope most of that was on the screen. I apologize if it wasn't because my video camera is overhead and I can't see. So, alright, there's that one.